Good evening, friends, and welcome back to another episode of Tim Kirby Russia. Today's topic is, what is the role of America going to be in a multipolar world? Why is that our question today? Because I was invited to a pretty big conference to talk about that very seriously in the beautiful Russian language through an American accent that I speak. However, that is not going to happen. There's some scheduling conflicts, and unfortunately, I'm probably going to have to pass on that wonderful opportunity. So I thought, excuse me, I am not a cocaine addict. My nose is just itchy. So anyways, I thought this would be a nice time to sit down and discuss this particularly interesting question with you all. So, before we do that, we're going to take a quick look at my other monitor here because, oh my gosh, what is that? It is Boosty. And if you go to my Boosty page there, you can actually make a donation. I know it says American Villages in Russia. That's because all that money goes towards that project so far. So if you donate there, you're not buying me coffee. You are buying the American Village, the life that it needs to survive. So anyways, I'd appreciate any donations if you could make them. But anyways, what is our topic today? It is the question of... my brain farted out there. I begged for money, and now my brain isn't working. Yes, it is the role of America in a multipolar world. So anyways, I'm going to stop scratching myself, and we're going to get to that. Now, the question here is a little bit odd because the role of something kind of implies that there's this sort of global structure. You know, you could say that one part, let's just say, we often compare things to the human body. Like we always say there's the head of our organization. It's the heartland of America, right? That, these different parts come together to make some sort of greater whole. And I'm not quite sure if we're really going to see the multipolar world as being part of some sort of like greater whole. Because in fact, I think it's more the globalist society where each major region of the world would play a different role in a globalist world makes more sense rather than you have that idea of playing roles being involved with this group of equal actors that all see each other as being essentially separate but equal. Uh-oh, that's a dangerous thing to say. But you see my point, right? So... I'm going to change the question of basically to what is multipolar America going to look like? I think that's probably going to give a better answer. And again, going back to remember one of the problems that we've had in seeing the America having a role in the world is that in the sort of globalist vision of the world, where there are different roles, China is kind of the factory of the world. Russia is the big fat resource basin, and the West was kind of the brains, the leadership, the management, and in theory the military power as well, right? And so that's been kind of part of a problem with America as a whole, as we've sort of gone from America having to be its own sort of independent country to being sort of the capital city of a globalist universe, and that is not been good for the United States. Ask anyone who's a working person, where'd their job go? Because if we were really over the last 30 years since the end of communism, since America had its moment, its end of history, if we had still been concerned about maintaining America as this independent pole in a multipolar world, then a lot of those jobs would have been shipped overseas, and things would be a lot better in America because they'd have to be. But when you're essentially part of a new world order, of one world government, then things can be terrible, and jobs can be shipped wherever they need to be, because they're all sort of part of the greater whole. So that's one sort of aside there, but we should just remember that globalism has really done the damage to American society that we're seeing and experiencing. That's really come from the whole globalist approach to things. So first off, when we come to a multipolar approach, do we have open borders or closed borders? Closed in the sense that, there's visas and we restrict the flow of people and we very much control it. Not closed in the sense of like North Korea or the Soviet Union. So do we have open or reasonably closed borders? Guess what? Multipolar America is going to have borders that are closed and controlled in a reasonable way. Okay, that's number one. That would be one major difference in a multipolar America that sees itself as one center of power on the planet that is maybe doesn't have to defend itself, that isn't at war, it's not the Cold War, but is in competition. with the other powers of the globe. Remember, we are never going to come to some sort of kumbaya moment where we achieve world peace, and no one is saying that the multipolar world order will completely eliminate war or completely eliminate the desire of some group of people to dominate another. That ain't going to happen, okay? But it's definitely going to restrict it, and if we think of things in terms of more like a sports competition, where, you know, every year when the NFL season kicks off, you know, it's not like the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to send assassins out to take out the Baltimore Ravens just to make sure that they don't play, okay? There's competition. The competition in the NFL is fierce, and they are fighting tooth and nail to win that Vince Lombardi trophy at the end of the season, but within reason, you know, and within a certain framework. And so if the United States is going to be in that sort of NFL level of competition against a few other poles on this planet, then it is definitely going to have closed borders, and it is going to have a military that is not designed, as it has been over the last 30 years, to fight insurgents or people in sandals or however you're going to refer to them, right? The military is going to have to be very much reformatted and very much so made efficient. As we've noticed, even Zelensky's complaining, and so are American politicians, that they're out of the standard shell for the NATO artillery cannons. Like stuff like that. Like, you know, we pay, $850 billion in taxes every year towards this thing, and yet they can't even make shells. So there's definitely going to be a multipolar America, because it's going to be more grounded in reality and not some sort of globalist utopia. Well, one good thing for the Army, oh, there's a mosquito on me. One good thing for the Army is that, or I should say the military, excuse me, I know people who've served in one branch of the military do not like when you call the whole thing the Army, sorry. The military is that it is going to be more grounded in reality, and thus it's going to be forced to become more efficient, and, as some would say, less woke. Because a woke military of feelings and freaks and total inefficiency is not going to stand in a world that has real competition. Okay, so we've got closed borders. Again, closed borders with visas, so they're not completely closed, but they're definitely restricted. I don't know, maybe we should come up with a better term. Because, you know, if there's open borders, the opposite would be closed, but closed borders was more like the Soviet Union. Try getting in there. Semi-closed borders. And we're going to have a military that is grounded in serving the mission of competing with the other poles within the multipolar world, not necessarily fighting them, but being capable of fighting them, rather than being oriented towards, people who are essentially, as they say in the video game industry, murder hobos, right? So we're going to have to change that. That's going to be another major change. One of the other things that's going to be probably the most important. Well, let's talk about, again, the geopolitics. I even mentioned the geopolitics. It was written in the intro to this video. One of the key things that I think, but this is a little more, there's a bit more room for sway. In a multipolar world, the U.S. military has to perform. The border has to become regulated, and this whole issues of who's a citizen, that has to be solved. Okay, those become vital issues. Now, the geopolitical question of what America is actually going to look like is a little bit different. Okay, if we sort of look at a map of the world, and we listen to sort of the rules of geopolitics. Well, we see the United States still has a lot of people in it. It is still pretty darn big. And maybe it could, as it did in the past, continue on in its sort of current borders. And that'd be fine. That's one option. And that's very possible and seems very doable. The United States has probably the best geopolitical position in the world, with a very underpopulated Canada to its north that speaks the same language and is very culturally similar. And Mexico that has been able to sort of keep stamped down for quite some time, and then you go beyond that, you're getting into Central America with these sort of, Guatemala, Nicaragua, Nicaragua, not exactly the strongest, most threatening countries in the world. Of course, the regime in Cuba is against the United States, but they don't have that many people, they don't have that much wealth, and they're an island. So really, the United States is sort of protected by water, protected by lack of population from Canada, and has really been able to sort of focus on and keep Mexico away. And there is the Rio Grande River. It doesn't go all the way, but there is also a physical barrier down there as well. So the one option is for America to stay the way it is. Now, the one thing that might sound scary to people is some sort of North American integration, because generally that's seen as a project of globalism. But as Putin himself said, multipolarity is a sort of a alternative vision of globalism, that to some way there's going to be a sort of uniting of these poles. However, they will never become one single entity. And that effect may happen with the United States because of the sort of shape of North America, which is like, you know, a big fat triangle with the meaty part of the triangle being the actual United States. Well, it seems almost natural that at some point Canada would be integrated, assimilated, so on and so forth in the United States. And rather than this whole Reconquista thing happening, it also seems more predictable that in a multipolar world and through these processes that are expected to happen of the sort of integration of similar cultures and regions, that Mexico and the rest of Central America would essentially be sort of absorbed into a giant North America. Now, of course, that raises a lot of questions. Some would immediately say, but Canadian healthcare, but American healthcare, but Mexico is poorer, this, that, and the other, right? It's sort of more matters where people can sort of form a cohesive whole. And that's where we, and also before I forget, one thing that's very important in the geopolitical future of the United States, Alaska and Hawaii. Because with the laws of geopolitics, generally territory that doesn't sort of have a physical connection to the central core of the civilization is always very losable. And that's another reason why the United States would want to do its best to sort of integrate with Canada to make sure that Alaska is, whether de facto or de jure, Alaska still stays completely in contact with the continental United States by some mechanism, right? So that way it doesn't go away. Because trust me, people are really, really angry at this woke stuff. And when you're in Russia, you get to hear some translated letters from local officials in Alaska who things are going so woke in America, Alaska might be considering going back home. And from a Russian perspective, Alaska was sort of not particularly legally sold to the United States anyways. So the United States should really get on that and make sure that Alaska feels really super at home and does not escape. Hawaii has been critical to the United States as its big floating aircraft carrier in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, and of course dominating the Atlantic and the Pacific and the Panama Canal for so long has been really good for America, so why stop? And so the United States should definitely try to focus on making Hawaii again happy, because there are also some cranky independence movements on the Hawaiian Islands that need to be convinced that they're a terrible idea by one means or another. Okay, so that's sort of geopolitical outlook of it. But still, the geopolitical situation of the United States, barring some sort of horrific catastrophe where the South rose again and America was shattered into some, so like the continental United States was broken up in some way, that the one ocean wasn't connected to the other ocean, barring some sort of bizarre total catastrophe, things are probably going to be good geopolitically for the United States, okay? Yeah. So, next on the line then would be the ideological question, because how could the United States sort of agree to expand this integration? It would definitely require a sort of new ideology. One of the things about our problems in the United States is we created this sort of Western-style democracy. Russians call the system liberalism. That doesn't necessarily mean the liberalism that Republicans talk about. They mean the entire idea of a system based on individual liberty is called liberalism, as in rights of the individual, and the individual is the core of everything. That has been the idea that the United States has fairly successfully exported throughout the world. But the world is also, at the same time, for the most part, besides the West, pretty much rejected or despises or is resentful towards. And so one of the ways that America could find a new sort of solution to the ideological problem is that they could shift the idea to being like, okay, we have this idea, this sort of like libertarian kind of, this liberalism. We've got the U.S. Constitution. It's amazing. But this all came from one particular stream of history. As the Russians say, You can't force another culture into a box and make them Russians, right? And so, in a lot of ways, the United States, if it started to think that its way of doing things wasn't this sort of universal that other cultures fail to grasp, but they really should, to seeing it as sort of this unique phenomenon that could only have happened in America due to certain historical circumstances, and that this idea is something, it's precious. It's like a newborn baby or a super rare baseball card or something like that that needs to be taken care of. You know, if you've got that super rare original Babe Ruth rookie card, you need to keep it in a nice dry environment in one of those nice thick acrylic plastic tombs that they keep expensive baseball cards in. You know what I mean, to keep it in good condition. And that perhaps the new ideology of America would be something kind of like Trump's MAGA, but this very much that this ideology only applies to us. It's this sort of internal thing that comes through this line of the native speakers of the English language, and then the people who have sort of connected to them, the African Americans, the Latino Americans, Asian Americans, and so on and so forth, the Native Americans, who have all sort of been generation upon generation in contact with the sort of Anglo-Saxon something or other, and we're all sort of part of that greater ideology that only applies to us. Because one thing I can tell you, friends, is that in Russia, now that we've sort of brought back Christianity and also flicked the switch that Russian ideas are basically only for the sort of Eurasian Russian space and really wouldn't work for other cultures, it's a good thing. No ideological export, no needing to fight wars to convince people to live the way that we want them to in Moscow. It's amazing. And it's really cheap. It's a lot more affordable. So I think that there has to be some sort of major ideological shift. And that shift could either be inclusive or exclusive. It'd probably be better if it was inclusive, like I said, that we're going to see ourselves in America as this unique blend of this like Anglo-Saxon, African, Aztec, of this sort of combination of these sort of three overall groups. Because when we really talk about America, we tend to say like black, white, and Hispanic, and seeing ourselves as a sort of like trinity of these different ways of doing things that are all going to merge together. That could be something that could really, sort of excite people. And it could also, again, create the sense of us having this sort of group, this in-group, and that we have this wonderful, blessed mentality that others are too stupid or too inferior to understand. And that's a good kind of position to unite America around. Of course, over American history, generally we've looked at other ethnicities in sort of a weird. Despite the fact that we're a nation of immigrants, we're also very exclusive. I mean, look at how the Irish are treated, the Italians, the Polish, and especially black Americans, and various other groups. So in some ways, making a home as being part of Team America has been not the easiest thing to do. So who knows? It could perhaps become this sort of national libertarianism where it's more of a exclusive way of looking at things. That'd be less efficient, but it could be this thing where only the sons of Europe and Western Europe who really understand this democracy stuff have the right to own it and possess it and all that. But essentially, long story short, the whole globalist agenda that is sort of pushed by both the left and the right in America in different forms, be it the sort of like universal values, lefty sort of globalist vision, or the right wing, the United States dominates the globe and is the world's policeman, and Washington is Rome and everywhere else is garbage. Both those visions are not going to work in the future, and they're going to have to be replaced by kind of something else. And how is that going to look? And how is that going to work to create a big, stable civilization that may even actually become bigger in the long run than it currently is now? That's a little bit up for debate. So I think that the United States is going to be forced to make, at the very least, those changes. So what are these changes again? So I don't even forget myself. That I think that there actually will be sort of a cultural expansion, especially if we ideologically start to view the entire North American continent as essentially one sort of thing, the sort of new world civilization that is the Anglo-Saxon, African, Aztec realm that makes it sort of separate and different from everywhere else. That is probably going to lead to expansion. It is probably going to lead to an American sort of renaissance because America is going to be forced to think about itself. The military is going to change. This border situation is going to change. What else? It's also going to have to be very much demand that to some extent, a reindustrialization of America, because in a multipolar world, you cannot completely rely on like importing stuff, because the people you're importing from are no longer, colonized or semi-colonized. They have, brains. You'd be surprised how many people in Western governments, how they claim to love those poor, suffering Africans and other poor people across the globe, and yet they never think that they have brains, because they do. And, as Africa begins to rise, we don't know what form Africa's going to take. But, some people say that Nigeria has a massive population core, and around it is kind of more sparse. So there could be one pole around Nigeria. And what if they don't want to export everything that they dig out of the ground for pennies on the dollar? What if they don't want to do what they're told by Washington? You see, then all of a sudden you're going to have your own alternatives. You're going to have your own mining, your own manufacturing, because there's no guarantee that the other entities on the planet are going to necessarily sell you stuff for cheap anymore. Which, again, will be good, because remember, one thing that could have definitely helped during the 1950s, well, of course, World War II helped because all of America's competition murdered each other. But besides that, one thing that definitely helped is that since in America you could kind of only hire an American or a fresh immigrant who would become an American to do stuff, that was pretty good, because everyone kind of had to pay decent wages to expensive laborers, and then they were able to take that money. There wasn't the sort of whole culture of buy everything cheap. The real wealthy period in American history, some things were cheap, like gasoline, but things weren't that crazy cheap, especially clothing, and a lot of stuff that we take for granted as plastic junk from China today. So we really, really could see a very different set of economic behaviors of the whole, I'll put it this way, the whole like Walmart lifestyle of, buying cheap $2 t-shirts from China and all that. That could go by the wayside. Very much so. So yeah, that would definitely change, because Walmart really in a lot of ways relies on globalism. It relies on these global networks, and again, it really relies that there are going to be poor, exploitable whoever's to make these $2 shirts in presumably not the best conditions. And if those people, start to stand up for themselves, or they become part of the sphere of some greater culture, then they're not going to be exploitable anymore, and things are going to have to change. So that is another really important aspect to a multipolar America. Let's see, was there anything else I wanted to cover with this? But in general, let's then make a summation. I think I've kind of talked about this for long enough. In summation, the one thing that I can say is that the multipolar America, in a lot of ways, with the exception of the dreams of a lot of the white nationalists, sorry, white nationalists, I don't think that your particular vision for the future America is quite the one that's going to happen. But in the multipolar world, who knows? Maybe I'll be wrong, but I don't think that that's going to be the case. And not because I like it or I don't like it, but because I think it's going to happen. Because most people make predictions. They predict what they want to happen. I don't. So anyways, I don't think that there will be this sort of like apocalyptic, like white nationalist takeover or something. I think probably the America of the multipolar world is going to, in some ways, actually become a more, let's just say, the right wing is going to get what it wants about like reindustrializing America, about getting back to more constitutional principles, the sort of, Monero Doctrine kind of era way of looking at the world, that North America from the Panama Canal up all belongs to us and we're going to dominate it. That's something that I think that they can get behind, but I think that it will also, by necessity, for the United States to remain powerful, by necessity, it's going to require some sort of new ideology that's going to have that sort of the right wing's kind of core ideas of liberty and individual freedom and all that stuff, but mixed into this sort of thing that integrates the Africans and the Latinos and the whites all into this sort of new culture that's unique, but is the bearer of this specific blend of ideas, and only they can be the bearer. So I think the left is going to get a bit of what it wants, maybe towards labor. The left has always claimed that it cares about labor. I don't believe it, but they claim to, and it would definitely be good for American labor. It definitely won't be good on the purse strings there, because all of a sudden t-shirts are going to be expensive. Even like, gosh, when was that? Like 15 years ago. There was a company that my one friend bought like a hooded sweater for. I think they made like American-made clothing. I mean, you're like a hoodie cost $90. Like a blank blue hooded sweatshirt was like $90. But it was made in America 100%. From the materials, also made in America 100%. And that's probably the kind of situation that we're going to see in more of a multipolar world. You're going to have less hoodies, but man, are they going to be made really well on the territory of the United States. It's going to be a hooded sweater that can survive the friggin' apocalypse. So, yeah, I think that's the left and the right are going to get kind of a bit of what they want. And, yeah, I think the United States is going to change shape, because in my opinion, when I tell my own children about history, I see the United States as having three major phases. We have the sort of the revolutionary phase, where we had the War of Independence, that where so a lot of these ideas of what this system of liberty, this liberalism, was going to look like, the early experiment that led up to the Civil War. And then from the Civil War to World War II, we have this sort of period of industrialization, the rapid growth of capital and economic power within the United States, the real true industrial revolution. And then after World War II, that's when we have America, the superpower, and the Cold War. And maybe we could say there's sort of a fourth period of the triumphant Pax Americana. So let's say 4 periods. The Pax Americana that won the Cold War and then decided to shoot itself in the foot every day afterwards and destroy all of its that it achieved in order to become the capital city of a globalist world. And when the multipolar moment comes for the United States and it stops trying to play Pax Americana, which essentially America is really losing the ability to do what it's been doing since 1991, and at some point it'll completely lose it, and then at some point it'll lose it and acknowledge it. And at that point, that's when there'll be a multipolar America, and I think that America will be, of course it'll still have the Constitution, hopefully. We can only pray. We can only pray that the basic binding document that gave America life will continue to exist. That we can hope for, but I think it's going to be so different from the previous iteration of America that it's going to become its own thing. Like, to the degree that, like, America in 1812 was different from, like, 1870 during Reconstruction, or from 1870 to, like, 1950 when America's already has global ambitions and all that, or from 1950 to 1995 when the United States is the only world power and can sort of dictate whatever it wants to whoever it wants and all that. Like, it's going to be that different, but I think it's going to be different in a way that we can't completely predict, because no one can predict the future, not even me. So anyways, if you enjoyed this little breakdown of what America will look like in a multipolar world, why don't you go to my Boosty? There it is, boosty.to/Tim Kirby Russia is one word. It says American Village there, but also says Tim Kirby. You can look at that right there, and you can donate. All of your donations really help me out. I really super appreciate it. And they all go at this point towards actually doing the American Village, but later on they'll go towards helping me. So anyways, friends, it was great talking to you, and I hope you enjoyed this video.